Welcome to Here's the Thing. My name is Vince Negro, and with us on today's program is Bruce McIntosh. Bruce, welcome to the program.
Hi, Vince. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into a lot of the things you're working on these days and have worked on, I'd like to have our audience know a little bit about who Bruce is. Who was Bruce in high school? Who was Bruce? Take me back to high school. I know you got a lot of stuff in your mind, but who was Bruce in high school?
Bruce in high school was the kid who told the joke of the day. I was on students' council. I did the morning announcements a lot. Used to like planning dances and stuff. Student politics, it goes way back.
Yeah. So yeah, that whole being involved started back in high school, being involved on student council and organizing events, dances, all kind. Was that here in Toronto? Was it here in Toronto?
No, I'm from Peterborough originally. Moved down here in the early 80s. Got a job down here and just love Toronto.
Right. So you came to Toronto. Your work in terms of working with disability, with people with disability and stuff. Talk to us a little bit about that, how that came about.
Well, that's a really interesting story. Both my parents had polio when they were young. My dad when he was 19 and my mom when she was 4. And they met at a summer camp for kids with disabilities. And one thing led to another. They got married and along I came. And so I don't really remember a time, disability was just reality. In my world. And advocating for supports and inclusion, accessibility. So, in the 70s, we were looking for things like wheelchair van transportation. And today, that's run of the mill, but we were after ramps into buildings and curb cuts and wider bathroom doors. So years later, I had a kid of my own, and I actually named my son for my father.
Yeah.
My dad died when I was 16, and I miss him every day.
Yeah.
But I named my son for my dad because if, the strength that man had, if that could be in my boy, that would be just fine with me.
Right.
Well, it turns out that my son has autism. And that was a surprise. We knew something was different for quite a while, but it takes time to get to a diagnosis. All sorts of things get tried out first. They do hearing tests because maybe the kid isn't as social. Are they listening?
At what age was he when you thought there was something different?
He was about 2, maybe a little before, and mainly that was just because he wasn't talking. Kids when they're 2 years old, you expect them to have at least a few words, right? And he wasn't as social. He was very isolated in his play. If you called his name, he might not pay any attention to you at all. And there were some things that he would do for a very long time. He loved doors, and he would open and close doors repeatedly for pretty much as long as you would let him. The trouble was, the longer you let him do it, the worse the meltdown would be when you tried to get him off of it. So we knew these things weren't right, but then, okay, what is it and what do you do? And finally, just around his 3rd birthday, which is typical, some kids get a diagnosis sooner, but usually it's in around 3 or 4. We got the diagnosis, and then it was, we've got to get some help. So at that point, I was actually working for the Ontario government.
Right.
I was working as chief of staff for a cabinet minister, and my minister happened to sit on the Health and Social Services Cabinet Committee. So at the same time that my wife and I were trying to find services for our boy, I was seeing all of the briefing notes going by saying, oh, what a wonderful world it is. Well, that wasn't it.
Yeah.
Everything has a wait list. And the worst thing about the autism wait list at the time was that there was an age cutoff. If you didn't get your kid into service by the time they turned 6, that was it. That was your last shot. It was going to, whatever there might be in school, but whatever was in school was not the intensive behavioral therapy that they need. So then I tried to figure out why. And I learned a lot about the way the money was administered and who got what contracts. And that's really what started me on the road to the coalition.
Right. And before we get to that, so you obviously had a first-hand view, knowledge, working with this minister. You saw the paperwork go right by you. And there were obviously a lot of discrepancies in terms of what was out there, communicated politically, I guess, and what was that realistically happening. Is that kind of...
That's the sum of it,
That's the sum of it. And was that the trigger for you to say, look, I'm going to continue on this path and really fight for this issue, aside from your son being there? Was that actually seeing the black and white there?
That was a big piece of it. The other piece came a couple of years later, because of course I was with the Conservative government at the time under Ernie Eves as Premier. We lost the 2003 election, and there was an interesting little turn of events that campaign. Because of that age cutoff, there were a group of families that had a class action suit that said the age cutoff was discrimination. And they had a lawsuit against the government asking for the age cutoff to be struck down. Well, in that 2003 campaign, Dalton McGuinty was running for Premier. He wrote a letter to a mom and said that he was opposed to the age cutoff and he would withdraw it. Well, they won the election, McGuinty, but he didn't do that. In fact, he kept defending against the lawsuit. And eventually, the parents of the lawsuit won. The government was told to remove the age cutoff. And you know what they did, Vince? They appealed.
They appealed it?
They appealed it.
Oh my God.
And at that point, there was a gang of us sitting up in the public gallery at Queen's Park when this was announced. And we lost it, because he had made a campaign promise on paper. The woman's name was Nancy Morrison. She lived in Bradford. We went bananas. And it was at that point we said, okay, like this court case could go on for who knows how long. There's no guarantee that you would win anyway. And so we thought, okay, those families will fight in the court of law. We'll fight in the court of public opinion. And that's how the coalition got started.